Just to preface all of this, maybe by saying that kind of we will obviously be kind of providing quite a bit of training on Original and anything else related to Canvas, Zoom, all the different kind of tell tools. Once kind of more staff members are kind of returned as part of semester one. This is maybe just to give a brief overview to Original, to anyone interested or to anyone who might be using it at the moment to correct exams. Our intention for today is to maybe just do a quick demo of the different features in Original and to identify how it can be used and show people how to kind of get set up and get using it. But primarily kind of our intention today would be to try and kind of take any questions people might have. So like I said, I'll demonstrate the different features and how to use the tool, but the intention would be to kind of try and answer people's questions in as much as possible. So there will be time at the end to deal with kind of individual questions. If you do have questions as I'm going through the session today, though, do please feel free to throw it into the Q&A area. And also, if you would like to make any comments or anything, feel free to put any points into the chat area. And if I don't get to your questions during this session, we will kind of set aside time at the end to have a chat about stuff in more detail. So this is the agenda for the session, and I'm just going to kind of power through it. In terms of kind of what Original is, basically it is replaced Turnitin in Canvas and in MTU. So Canvas is now turned off. Maybe just to mention on this that Turnitin, we're required to kind of, I'm sure as many of you would be aware, we're required to tender for certain software after a certain amount of time. So we were required to tender for anti-plagiarism software. Turnitin did not enter into that process. So regardless of the tender process, there was no way to renew with them. So Original is the tool which has come along to replace Turnitin. It provides indications of detected plagiarism, like with Turnitin, but there's a number of additional features to Original which we hope will be useful to MTU Cork staff, and that includes, detection of unusual use of characters, formatting, even people's writing style. And the other big advantage we found with Original is that it's more deeply integrated into Canvas than Turnitin. So that means that hopefully the process of using Original will be kind of more straightforward and kind of more streamlined for staff and students. That we'll be able to provide better support compared to Turnitin, which is quite a different interface, so on and so forth for Canvas than Canvas, and so on and so forth. It also supports the sharing and the adjustment of plagiarism findings by staff, so staff members can actually adjust what, like in Turnitin, okay, this is definitely plagiarism, this is most certainly not plagiarism, so on and so forth, and that kind of is reflected in the similarity score. And Original has a number of kind of features in beta which look quite good in terms of identification of sources in other languages, differences in user writing style, so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump straight into the process of how to use the tool, and we'll start by looking at how to create an Original assignment. So as I mentioned, it's a tool which is quite integrated into the kind of Canvas system, far more integrated than Turnitin was. So the basic process for creating an Original assignment is basically you create a normal Canvas assignment. So I'm going to go into my Canvas module, click on Assignments, and click on New Assignment. I'm going to give this a name. So we'll call this Test Original Assignment September. And I'm going to leave all these details. For the submission type for Original, you want to set it to online, and you want to have either a text entry or, I would say more preferably, a file upload. Obviously, if it's no submission, students won't be submitting, and if it's on paper, they're not going to be giving anything. So for Original to work, it has to be a file upload or a text entry. There's no point in having an Original thing for a website URL or for student annotation or media recordings, because those aren't really comparable the way a file upload or a text entry would be. So when you set the submission type to this, what will appear down the page a bit here is this option for plagiarism review. And all you need to do is change that from none to Original. That will bring up one or two additional features here. So anonymous basically means kind of whether you want to be able to view which students' work you're viewing. So all the anonymous setting does, if it's ticked, is hide, it hides the student name from you. And if you want to, you can select do not save documents submitted to this assignment in Urkund. And all that means is, if you remember with Turnitin, when a student submits a paper to a Turnitin assignment, the student's work is kind of added to this kind of repository that Turnitin draws from. So for example, if I, as a year 3 student, am attempting to upload the same assignment that a student in the same course did the previous year, Turnitin will catch that. By default, Ouriginal will kind of do that. So it will kind of add MTU student work to the kind of MTU database or kind of repository against which work is compared. If you want to, though, you can turn that off by clicking here. You also have the option down the page on when you want to show the similarity report to students. So it can be immediately, and obviously that will be useful if, let's say, you want to give students the opportunity to, if they're submitting something, to check what kind of plagiarism is being detected in their work. So they can, if they want to, for example, re-upload it. You can set it to after the assignment is graded. So that means that kind of the plagiarism detection will only be available to students after you've given them their marks and feedback. So that is kind of a more limited route, I guess, in terms of, it's kind of removing the ability for students to be able to kind of have a second kind of go. It's removing the ability for them to submit, get an idea of what kind of plagiarism is kind of showing up, and kind of resubmit. This basically means they won't have the opportunity to resubmit, or else after the due date. And again, the due date in Canvas is kind of the deadline. So in that instance, it would be the case that a student submits. After the due date passes, they see, okay, this is showing up as 20% plagiarized. So, if you want to, you can allow them to resubmit as a late submission. So those are the options really in terms of showing the report, or else you never showed the plagiarism detection score to the students. So that's pretty much it. In terms of kind of the process, again, it's kind of pretty much the exact same as setting up a regular Canvas assignment. The only difference is that kind of, again, it has to be a text entry or a file upload. And when you select those, you simply change the plagiarism review to Ouriginal. For the most part, I would suggest that these boxes don't need to be ticked. So you don't need to worry about either of those. When you show the report to students is entirely up to the individual lecturer's preference. I suppose the big difference really is if you want the student to have the opportunity to submit something, get the plagiarism score, and then kind of adjust or edit and resubmit, you would set it to immediately. If you don't want to give students that option, you would set it to pretty much any of the other three. Or if you don't want to see them to ever see the plagiarism detection score, you just press never. But when all of that, you can simply save and publish. It makes the assignment available. And if we briefly go into the student view, the big addition here is when they click start assignment and they upload the file, there is a little tick box here, which just the student is required to tick, which indicates that the assignment submission is the assignment submission is my own original work. Now I can see that Niamh has a question. Is there a limit to how many times they can submit and view score? The limit for that, Niamh, if you just bear with me 2 seconds, is tied to the actual Canvas assignment. So for example, if I decide, okay, I'm only going to let students upload once or maybe twice, that is the amount of times that they can kind of resubmit and view the score. Does that make sense, Niamh? So again, it's another indication that kind of Ouriginal is very, very tied into Canvas. It's very kind of deeply integrated in Canvas. It's essentially a Canvas assignment just with a couple of additional kind of settings, which is a bit of a different from Turnitin, which was a different interface, had different, sometimes competing settings with Canvas assignment, so on and so forth. Now, the other thing which I'll just mention briefly, just in case it's of use to anyone, is the process of changing a Turnitin assignment in Canvas to an Ouriginal assignment in Canvas is very straightforward as well. Now, as I mentioned, Turnitin is turned off. If you have a Turnitin assignment and a student has submitted to it already, there's no need to worry. Canvas will retain the student submissions, so nothing will be lost. But let's say if I imported from an assignment in from a previous module and that assignment was a Turnitin assignment, what we can do in order to adjust this is very simply, we can go to the assignments area, we can click on the edit option for the Turnitin assignment. From here, we simply click on more options. And all we need to do then is, if you remember for Turnitin assignments, the submission type was external tool and the Turnitin URL was inside here. So all we need to do here is simply change it to online, file upload, or text entry, and then the exact same process that we did before. And that is all that is required to change a Turnitin assignment into an original assignment. So that's quite a straightforward process. And like I said, regardless of whether Turnitin is turned in or on or off, if the student has submitted to the Turnitin assignment, their work should be retained. So after we submit against after students submit to an original assignment, you can get the plagiarism detection score, again, kind of quite integrated into Canvas, the same way you would normally view student results against the Canvas assignment. You simply go into the assignment, you click on Speed Grader, and what that will do is we'll open up Speed Grader, and you'll notice that there is an additional kind of item over here in the right-hand column. So that then provides in the result of the plagiarism detection. Now, this is something that I uploaded, obviously, from an existing source, so the plagiarism detection is very high. So again, after students have submitted, you simply go into the speed grader. If the student's work is kind of still in process, as in if Ouriginal is still kind of analyzing it, you'll see a little timer icon here. But what will happen is that kind of, over the course of an hour or two, that will the timer icon will change into an actual score, and you can view the kind of detailed results of that by simply clicking on that score. So if I click on this, that will then bring me to the original interface, and I can see kind of a detailed analysis of the student's plagiarism detection score. So because this is obviously quite kind of high, and again, the way you can move through the different students, you simply do as you normally would through the arrow or the drop down up in the top right corner of Speed Grader. And what you can do as well is, if there are any difficulties, if you want to kind of, if the original report isn't going through for any reason, or if there are any difficulties with it, there is going to be an option here to resubmit to original. And when we click on that, we see here that kind of, like I mentioned, the score has changed to this little timer icon, and it's just identifying that the submission is pending. So once that has worked kind of through, that timer icon will change to the plagiarism detection score. And like I mentioned, we can view the plagiarism detection report by just clicking on the little kind of score icon. So I'm just going to move from a very kind of high scoring document to a more general kind of document. When you first land on the original report, what you will see is something like this. I'm just going to jump back into this. Sorry, bear with me 2 seconds. What you will see is something like this. So this gives the analysis overview gives an initial indication of the, I suppose, the amount of plagiarism which has been detected. And you can see here that kind of, essentially, this is kind of just a color coding of the different pages. This is a 5-page document, or a 5-page student submission. So we can see here, obviously, it looks like there's been a lot of plagiarism in page 1 to lesson page 3 and page 4. If the student submission has a lot of pages, you can go to the analysis overview, and you can click view all pages, and that will give you kind of, pages, all of the different pages listed in the student kind of report. If I want to, what I can do is I can click on any of the individual pages, and that will give me a quick update on kind of what plagiarism was detected and where that plagiarism appears to be coming from. So for example, on page 1, we can see that kind of, okay, there is a matching block here that has high similarity of content with Wikipedia, and that this kind of, the potential plagiarism detected is up to 1,593 words. So I can do that for, the different pages if I just want to get a quick overview of the kind of findings. And that is a useful way of being able to quickly identify, okay, it looks like there's a lot of plagiarism happening on pages 1 and 2. There's a small bit on here on page 3. So if I click on that, that is obviously a different source. It's only 53 words, and this is where it looks to be kind of brought from. For all of those, I can also click on view details. And what that will do is it will bring me to this space where I get kind of a side-by-side comparison of the student work, the submitted document, and the matching text. So this is the matching text. This is where the matching text appears to be coming from. So one way of viewing the student work in the analysis report is to simply click on the pages, identify, let's say, large kind of sections where plagiarism might be happening, and you can view details to kind of get more information on that. Alternatively, what you can do is you can click on, let's say, findings or on view the entire document. And that brings you to essentially the same kind of space. But what I can do here using the tabs is I can view the findings. What that means is every instance of plagiarism detection, I can kind of go through those kind of one by one. So if I click on findings, I'm going to see, okay, this is one of 12 instances of plagiarism detection. If I want to, I can see the student work and the comparative matching text. And when I'm happy with that, I can click on next highlight. That brings me to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, so on and so forth. So findings is one way of just working through it on a step-by-step kind of approach. If I want to, I can view sources, and that gives me an indication of where potentially detected plagiarism has been kind of drawn from. And I can also click here to view the entire document, and that basically just gives me all of the students' kind of content along with kind of individual kind of points where plagiarism has been detected. And I can click on these icons on the right-hand side to get more kind of details. So for example, we can see here, okay, the first page looks like it has a load of plagiarism. If I click on the icon, I'm going to see, again, this is the same information that we were looking at earlier. It's just going to show me, here's what the student submission has. Here is where matching text could have been detected. And here at the end of the page is where it was brought from. So those are the different ways in which I can kind of, let's say, move through the document and identify where is potential plagiarism been detected and what source has it been brought from. Now, the other thing that I can do in this is that I can adjust the findings for these different kind of elements as I'm going through them. So let's say, just for the sake of argument, okay, I will go into the entire document, and let's say towards the base, I've identified, okay, I can see here that this is just a reference. So if I click on this, I can see, okay, this is a reference. I don't think this really counts as plagiarism. So what I can do here is I can click on the option here to include in analysis. Now, the current plagiarism detection score is 79%. If I say, okay, this doesn't really count as plagiarism, I can click on that to turn it off. And we can see here, it's kind of, there's no more kind of orange highlight for this. And the plagiarism detection score has dropped down to 78. If I want to do the same, let's say for the first page where there's kind of a high kind of amount of content, I can turn off include an analysis, and the plagiarism detection score drops down to 28. So in this way, we can identify, okay, if something is kind of plagiarized work, we can leave it in. If something is not plagiarized, then we can turn it off, and that will reduce the similarity score, excuse me, accordingly. Now, there is also within the kind of findings area and within the entire document, a couple of options up here. What this will do is it will identify for quotes. If this is turned on, it means that statements which are in quotes will be counted in the plagiarism detection. So that is something you can turn on or off. The same with brackets. So for example, if you do not want to include, let's say, any of the student content, which is in brackets as kind of potential plagiarism, you can simply leave that turned off, and that will do, excuse me, the same thing. The detailed text differences basically determines if Ouriginal should include general or specific material as plagiarism detection or not. So that really is just a way of trying to, a way of deciding how detailed the kind of plagiarism detection should be. Another useful feature within Ouriginal is the ability to turn off particular sources. Now, where this might kind of occur is, for example, if students are submitting work to you that you've already given them kind of a template for, it might show up that kind of certain there might be repeated elements between all student submissions, and Original might interpret this as plagiarism detection. So if you want students to have a very specific kind of introduction or table of contents or kind of referencing system or so on and so forth, it might be the case that plagiarism detection is being detected, but it's just a common template that you would have given students. And a useful feature within Original is the ability to go into sources and to turn off particular sources for the student. So for example, within here, if MTU Cork was showing up as a source, and that would refer to kind of other students who are submitting to the MTU Canvas instance. What you can do if you so wish is you can basically click on for each of the different sources. Like I'm just going to do with Wikipedia here. You can click on the arrow icon in here, and if you want to, you can basically just turn off this particular source as a resource. And if I turn that off, and I can just hit cancel there, what that will do is basically it will identify to Original, okay, any other instances of plagiarism detection from this particular source, forget about them. They're not plagiarism detection. Don't worry about them. And as you'll see, that will kind of bring down the similarity score quite a bit. If there was any kind of individual differences, you can kind of go back in and turn these on or off as required. And there is also the option, if you see here, for alternative sources, which is basically just kind of additional instances or additional kind of sources. So even if I'm turning this off, I might say, okay, well, I still want to keep in level 3, which refers to a particular kind of additional instance where the kind of material has been detected from. Olivia asks, for sources changed, that would need to be changed for each individual student then, as you correct. That is correct, Olivia. Now, what you can do in the back end of Original is provide particular templates that basically Original will kind of use to avoid plagiarism detection for specific elements. But for the most part, yes, if you are viewing a student work and let's say there are let's say a number of students submit against a particular assignment and you find that kind of the Original is picking up some of their work is overlapping, all you need to do is kind of from here go into view the entire document, go into sources, and just quickly turn this off. And that then will kind of turn off that particular source as a source of plagiarism detection. I suppose one of the key considerations as well, and this is something which we obviously would have mentioned quite a bit when we were talking about Turnitin, is it is kind of, I think, important to bear in mind that all of the findings of Turnitin, the findings of Original, they aren't definite detection of plagiarism. Rather, they're an indication of plagiarism which might be occurring. So on that basis, and we would have always kind of presented this caveat with Turnitin as well, it is important to maybe, even briefly look at the student's work in terms of, instead of just kind of assuming, okay, well, 79% of this is definitely plagiarized, to be able to look at the student's work and to be able to try and identify additional, any instances where plagiarism detection has been kind of falsely picked up on. If there are any suggestions as well, like obviously this is quite a new tool, so if you do have suggestions for improvements, please do feel free to share those with us and we can pass those on up the line to Original. Vincent raises a question, can you submit a file to Original without using Canvas, say a student who emails you a file, perhaps by setting up a test assignment in my sandbox module? Also, I saw a download icon on the Original page. Does this allow you to download the similarity report? Hi, Vincent. So yes, basically we would recommend, and this is something we're working with Original on at the moment, but something which we would suggest is that, if you want to submit a file to Original, let's say on behalf of a student, probably the best thing to do is to set up a test assignment in your sandbox module, as you recommended, Vincent. So to just go into your sandbox, which only you have access to, set up an original assignment, submit the student kind of work, and kind of view the plagiarism report based on that. To the second part of your question, in terms of a download icon, that is correct. So within this kind of original report, there is also the option to click here on this arrow icon. And what that will do is it will download a PDF of the plagiarism detection report, and you can open that then in order to view the findings, and it is presented a bit like this. In addition to that, there is also this kind of reset icon. What that will do is it will basically kind of reset the report status. So if let's say if we have made any changes, let's say we've turned off particular sources or we've identified certain kind of elements aren't plagiarism, this will basically kind of bring it back to the state we kind of came across it first. So you can see there it brings the plagiarism detection score back to 79%. I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but just one or two other kind of features which Ouriginal provides. Obviously, detection of plagiarism is kind of the main one, but there are a number of kind of pretty cool features over on the left-hand kind of column here. What you can do here is you can look at warnings, and what that does is it identifies any kind of unusual presentation of kind of content in the plagiarism report. So, for example, one thing which students might do, not MTU students, of course, but one thing which some students might do in the States, for example, is they might, instead of, let's say, typing out particular words, they might, as a way of kind of avoiding plagiarism detection system, they might kind of use underscores or they might use X's, as is the case here, to kind of construct sentences as a way of fooling basically plagiarism detection. So Ouriginal has the capacity to pick up on anything like that and to flag it as potential kind of not exact plagiarism detection, but something kind of strange going on. Additional elements might include suspicious use of characters or symbols. There's a number of different kind of ways in which plagiarism, or not plagiarism detection, but some Ouriginal would be able to identify, okay, something unusual is going on here with the student's work. What is also in beta mode is kind of translation detection. So if a student, let's say, takes a source or a paper in a foreign language and translates it into English, Ouriginal has as a way of trying to avoid plagiarism detection systems, Ouriginal has the ability to pick up on that, and it also has the ability to do something of an analysis on the writing style, and that is a way of identifying, let's say, okay, most of the document is composed in this particular format in terms of writing. Here is where we've identified certain sections of it where the type of writing, the writing style is quite different. Now, both of those are in beta mode, which means they're not kind of 100% fully released or kind of are still in kind of some form of testing phase. But again, potentially useful features just as a way of ensuring that kind of work is checked as thoroughly as possible and as a way of combating any kind of tips or tricks some have identified to try and fool these kind of plagiarism detection systems. Olivia is Ouriginal training for students obligatory, or will lecturers need to ensure they understand how it works? For the most part, I suppose on a practical level, Olivia, there isn't really kind of huge requirements for students, at least for submitting kind of work, to receive training on it. So if a student wants to submit against, they don't need to know how the system works to be able to submit. They just, as we identified earlier, select that tick box that says, I agree that this work is my own. But we will be making resources available to students on how to interpret the analysis overview report. But for the most part, I guess it really is a tool which is kind of maybe more for lecturers to make the decision on what level of plagiarism is acceptable, or sorry, not what level of plagiarism is acceptable, but kind of as a way for lecturers to review student work with a view to plagiarism detection. But yeah, we will be making kind of resources available to students, Olivia, so that if they do want to, let's say, try and interpret the plagiarism detection report, there will be some kind of guidelines for them on how to do just that. But for the most part, it is primarily a tool for lectures, and yeah, a resource for lecturers to kind of help them navigate student work. So in terms of the demonstration, how to create an assignment, how to access reports, how to kind of look at the analysis report in depth, certain considerations may be just worth bearing in mind. And some of you may already have experienced this. Currently, email has a habit of sending a lot of emails to you to inform you when a document has been submitted, when the similarity report has been completed. We're in the process of working with Ouriginal to turn these off for MTU staff. Over time, you can decide yourself how many or how little emails you want to receive, but we're aware that people's inboxes are very busy. So at the moment, we're in the process of basically turning those off, and staff can turn those back on as they wish. But I would say in general, everything is going to be available via Canvas. So we don't really think that kind of staff need to be getting bombarded with emails. And we're hoping to have that kind of fixed over the next couple of days. As I mentioned before, it's a potential plagiarism detection tool. It is important maybe to not take the scores presented in Ouriginal as like absolute. It's important for staff to try and look at the results to determine whether it is plagiarism, actual plagiarism or not. And you can adjust that yourself to raise or lower the overall similarity score. But for the most part, I would say, like I mentioned earlier, when I said it's kind of a tool for staff, it's maybe something for, staff to kind of make their own decisions around. So for example, I would say, if a student's work is showing up a high plagiarism detection score, I would suggest that, if a student's work is showing up with a high plagiarism detection score, but you're confident that their work is not kind of excessively plagiarized, I wouldn't go to the trouble of trying to adjust it so it's perfect for the student. The important thing is that you can make a decision yourself on, okay, look, this is clearly not plagiarized. Their work is acceptable. I'm going to give them their grades and feedback. In terms of multiple submissions, it might be the case that a student would submit multiple drafts of an assignment via Canvas. When this happens in Ouriginal, it has a mechanism to avoid self-plagiarism. So if I submit my work and then I kind of resubmit it through Canvas, and for the most part the submission is the same, Ouriginal will detect that, okay, this is Dara submitting the same work to the same assignment, so I'm not going to count the first submission as a potential kind of source of plagiarism. But if I was to submit using a different email address or using a different account in Canvas, then it can bring up difficulties. Now, that second scenario obviously is something we're not envisaging, but maybe just to be aware that it is a possibility. Key to this is really just checking the analysis report. You can also turn off the MTU source, and there is also an option within Ouriginal where if Ouriginal identifies, okay, this work is very similar to another student's work or to something which was submitted, it is possible to it will flag that in the analysis report, and you can kind of turn that on or off as you wish. And finally, the question about uploading on behalf of a student, Vincent had that question earlier, and the main recommendation we would say is to simply set up the assignment in a sandbox or test module and upload the student work there. So just before moving on to support, I'm just going to answer one or two of the questions that I see coming in. Bridget asks, in terms of turning on or off sources, will the MTU sources provide details of original author it's coming from the repository? E.g., if you were asking students to submit a draft assignment before final submission, can you tell from the source detail who the original author is, whether or not it's the student's own previous draft versus a classmate's work? And yes, you can do that, Bridget. As part of the process for using Ouriginal, there is a setting available in the backend to identify the level, I guess, of metadata associated with kind of findings. So it is certainly possible. We don't have an instance of it here because like this report and the other reports I have are mainly kind of content is mainly drawn from the web. But in terms of identifying the source, it is possible to kind of gather more details on the source of the potential plagiarism, and kind of get information. It's something we can certainly investigate further. It's kind of something we can ask Original about. So you can kind of access that metadata as far as I'm aware, but I'll check that further and include kind of information on that, obviously in our help articles and so on and so forth. Angus asks, can Original check if an assignment was submitted last year or previously? So I think that's maybe related to the question that Bridget had, Angus. We'll check that for you. The degree to which it identifies this source relates to, you know, an MTU student. This is the student's name. This is the student's information. This is when it was submitted. There is some element of that kind of which can be supported, but I'm not entirely sure to what degree it is. It's definitely something we can follow up with Original. I guess the difficulty there potentially is student privacy on some level. So to what degree, you know, considerations would have to come in terms of, you know, let's say me having access to you know, information which is potentially inappropriate in terms of what student, what year, so on and so forth. So it's something we can ask Original about, but we're kind of conscious that might be something we potentially have to discuss with, I don't know, MTU kind of management, just in terms of how much or how little information can kind of reasonably be made available. So that is something we'll investigate further and provide more information on in our kind of supporting resources and help and so on and so forth. In terms of support for Original, there is an email support line, and there is also a phone number, which is Swedish, but they are English speaking. So you can email support@original.com if you have any difficulties, or you can also ring the phone number there. Also, if you're ever in doubt or kind of have any difficulties accessing those, within the analysis report, there is this icon over here on the right, top right corner. And what you can do there is that will bring up a kind of an interactive tour, which will kind of explain the different sections of the analysis report. So if you ever have any difficulties or kind of aren't sure of how to navigate this, you can just click on that help icon up here, and that will kind of walk you through all the different parts of the analysis report. Also, if you click on the profile item here, I would say for the most part, you can ignore most of these settings, but there is the option here for support, and that will bring you to the Original support page where you can access the email, the phone number, you can fill in a form, so on and so forth. And there's FAQs and guides and tutorials. And if you want to as well, apart from support, there is also a help option. If you click on that, basically, it'll give you a PDF of the analysis report. So if you ever find yourself in any way stuck or confused in the use of Original or the analysis report or anything at all, there's a number of kind of options there, from a kind of guided tour through it to the help option, which is the kind of PDF, and also the you can access the support page in order to view, in order to access the support email, support phone number, direct form, so on and so forth. In addition to this, we also have a range of help articles up on our TEL kind of knowledge base. So there's a section there for Original, and that is information on how to create a report, accessing the results, the analysis report, adjusting the analysis report, so on and so forth. So look, all that is left in terms of the session today is just to thank everyone for coming. If anyone does have any outstanding questions that they would like to ask, more than happy to take those now. I'm just going to turn off my mic for a little bit and shut up. And if you do have any questions, please do throw them into the Q&A area, or feel free to raise your hand or enter something into the chat. So one question from Bridget is if it has a feedback studio feature similar to Turnitin. So it doesn't, Bridget, but the intention is that basically SpeedGrader provides all of the functionality that Turnitin feedback studio did. So the benefit of this really is that instead of having Turnitin feedback studio and SpeedGrader and others, you can basically kind of use Turnitin to kind of provide those same features. Or excuse me, you can use SpeedGrader in Canvas to provide those same features. So if I want to give students any feedback in particular, like I would have done in the Turnitin Feedback Studio, I can use all of the different tools available here to give students feedback. there is also a feature within SpeedGrader, which allows me to provide a new feature which allows me to create this kind of library of comments that I can add into a student's work. So for example, if I find myself giving the same kind of feedback again and again and again, I can basically create kind of comments. So let's say, yeah, good introduction. If I'm going to be saying the same things again and again to students, I can simply bring that up, click on that, and throw it into the overall feedback space as a way of kind of presenting kind of repeating information here. So one of the advantages we would see with Original basically is that the Turnitin system and the Turnitin Feedback Studio had a lot of kind of conflicting kind of resources to the resources available in Canvas. Yeah, the idea here really is that kind of, because it's more integrated, it's a much simpler process to be able to give feedback and marks through SpeedGrader. And then if you want to include plagiarism detection, you just turn on Original as part of a Canvas assignment and hop into the analysis report as you wish. Did anyone else have any other questions? And I would suggest if you don't have any questions, maybe just give me a no into the chat area, and just as a way of us saving anyone kind of hanging around unnecessarily. Okay, great. Like I mentioned, we will be providing additional training in relation to Original, kind of once semester one is kind of up and going in a more kind of official, formal capacity. So this certainly won't be your last chance to ask any questions in relation to this, or this won't be the only kind of training session we'll be giving. All that's left to do so otherwise is just say thank you very much, everyone, for your time and for coming along today. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you very soon over the next coming weeks. So hope everyone has a good start of semester, and we'll talk to you again soon.